Okay, so today's daf is Ketubot daf Tzadik Aleph. We are near the bottom of daf Tzadik Amabet. Let's go. We got a lot to cover, a lot of interesting topics to cover, and a lot of background that's necessary to really make sense of the beginning of what we're going to be doing. So let's first remember two important concepts. We've seen them before, especially yesterday, but really we saw them a few weeks ago, but we didn't really deal with the second of the two concepts at that time. And the main source for that second concept is the Mishnah that we're going to have later on in today's daf. So as is often the case, the Gemara assumes all of the knowledge that you have, the knowledge of everything, even the things that we haven't yet learned. But it makes it a lot easier if you have a chance to go over it ahead of time and then go over it a second time. So let's take a look. So the first concept is Ketubot banin dichrin. This is the idea that when ordinarily, if the man predeceases, the husband predeceases the wife, so then the woman gets her ketubah. And of course, to the extent that there are no children, she'll inherit everything, or she'll have access to everything, during her lifetime. And so, that's point number one. But what happens if she predeceases her husband, so she never gets her ketubah? And not only that, but if she predeceases her husband, not only does she not get the ketubah, but everything that she owns becomes part of his estate. And so as a result, rather than going to her descendants, it goes straight to him, and then it will go to all of his descendants, meaning not only her children, but children that he may have had with some other wife. And so as a result, the rabbis realized that fathers would be less likely to give to their daughters if they knew that their daughters might lose those assets and have those assets go to the children of other women, not necessarily the daughter. And so as a result, they instituted the Ketubot banin dichrin. And the Ketubot banin dichrin says the assets, whatever assets the wife is bringing into the marriage, those assets she's going to take out, or those assets will get separately inherited by her children, separate from any other children that the husband may have. And so as a result, if wife A brings property A into the marriage and wife B brings property B into the marriage, so then the children of wife A will inherit property A, and the children of wife B will inherit property B. However, the rabbis recognize that is undermining to some degree the biblical concept of Yerusha, of inheritance. And so as a result, they said that this only applies if there is an extra dinar in the estate, meaning that not only do you have the property A and property B that would go to the two separate wives and the descendants of the two separate wives, but rather there's also, in addition to that, in the estate, when the man dies, is not just property A and property B, but also a dinar, which can then be divided up among the children, among all of the children, in the appropriate fashion for inheritance. So that means that the eldest son will, gets double, the Bechor gets double, and then everybody else gets a particular share. All the other boys get a particular share. And if there are no boys, so then it goes among the girls. So that is Motar Dinar. And then yesterday we said that, it just said saw, actually this is still editable, so I'll change it right now. We saw that the Ketubot banin dichrin, is one of inheritance. And so as such, it takes a backseat to the rights of any creditors of the husband's estate. And those creditors include the ketubah rights of a surviving spouse. So in the case where you have two wives, wife A and wife B, and wife A dies before the husband, wife B dies after the husband dies. So now since wife B died after the husband, her right, she had, when she died, rights to the ketubah. And those rights to the ketubah is a debt, a credit that she has against her husband's estate. And so those creditor rights that her children have are collectible first. They come out of the estate before any children inherit anything. And so as a result, that is those creditors are going to get the ketubah rights before the children of wife A will inherit their Banin Dikrin rights. Okay, and then if one wife dies when the husband is alive and the other wife dies after the husband dies, so in that case, we actually had a machlokas yesterday. And then with this, we'll be ready to begin today's daf. So what was the machlokas that we saw yesterday? That Benana said that the sons of the first can say to the sons of the second, you are children of the creditor, take the ketubah of your mother and go away. Meaning we get our Banin Dikrin inheritance. Whereas Rabbi Akiva said, the estate of the first wife to die already jumped away from the inheritors and came to the second, meaning there is no Banin Dikrin inheritance whatsoever. Rabbi Akiva apparently is concerned that a Banin Dikrin rights when one wife dies before the husband and one wife dies after the husband, that will create animosity among the children. Why? Because the children of the second wife will not have access to the Banin Dikrin rights, but yet their mother is dead also. And so why should they end up effectively with less just because their mother ended up dying after the father died and not before the father died? So as a result, in that circumstance, Rabbi Akiva says, no, we don't want to encourage fighting. And so as a result, we're going to eliminate Banin Dikrin rights. So now that we have this machlokas tanaim between Beinanos and Rabbi Akiva, we're ready to take a look at another brisa and suggest whether this is in fact also the same machlokas. And so we begin 6 lines up on Tzaddik Amabet, V'hani Tanai. V'hani Tanai, Ki Hani Tanai, that these two Tanaim, namely Beinanos and Rabbi Akiva, are just like another set of Tanaim. Titania, because we learned in a brisa, Nasa es harishona umesa, the husband marries the first wife number A, wife letter A, and she dies. Nasa es hashniya umesu, and now he married wife B, and now he died. So the ones of this one, now it's not clear, is that the first one or the second wife? So we're going to assume now, like Rashi understand, and Rashi explaining how the Gemara is going to see it, we're going to assume that it's referring to the second wife. So the children of the second wife, they come, la'achar misa, after the death, menotling ksuva siman, they get the ksuva of their mother, meaning that they are the only ones who get a ksuba, meaning the first wife A, her children do not get the ksuba of Banin Dikrin, because this is a situation where this Tanakama would agree with Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Shimon says, Im yesh mosar dinar, if there is more than a dinar extra beyond the ability to satisfy both the Banin Dikrin rights and the rights of the ksuba for the wife who died second. So then elu notling ksubas iman, these ones will take their ksuba, namely the children of wife A will get their Banin Dikrin rights along with whatever ksuba payment is associated with it. The elu notling ksubas iman, and the other ones will also get their ksuba payment, that namely the payment of the ksuba that they're promised under the ksuba if the husband dies. So they'll inherit when the husband promised that to the mother in the ksuba, so that amount of money will go to them.
David,
yeah.
Can you remind me, is a dinar a small amount or a large amount?
A dinar is the main decent sized amount. So it's not a pruta. It's I actually have a chart
What would be the today's analog, like
um,
$100?
yeah, I don't know whether a dinar, a dinar is one level below a shekel, but it's it's many levels above a pruta. So 2 dinar is equal to a shekel. So it's a dinar is equal to a half shekel, and then you go up from that to a sela, and then there's a mana, and then there's a dinar zahav, and so that there's a number of things above it. So it's basically, I sort of view it as like the dollar, right? Because it's you have pennies and you have lots of penny, nickel, quarter, dime. I didn't mention that one. So penny, nickel, dime, quarter, a half dollar, and then you have the dollar. And then at the same time, you got the $2 bill, the $5 bill, the $10 bill, the $100 bill, $20 bill, $100 bill, $50 bill, etc. So I sort of view it, a dollar is a nice way to sort of view it. So it's not the lowest, but it's also not the highest.
So it's a very small amount when we're talking about an estate.
Well, I don't have a good sense for the values of properties, but we'll see some values of properties, but it's
Well,
not
compared to how much he owes for a ketubah.
correct. You're absolutely right. It is smaller than the ketubah amount. Indeed, we saw yesterday, I believe, that the ketubah amount could potentially satisfy the Moser dinar. That if in fact you're able to pay the entire ketubah amount, that in and of itself could potentially be the Moser dinar. But we'll bracket that for the moment. So the point is that chalkim b'shavah. So if you don't have the extra dinar, then everybody divides equally, meaning it's divided the way a regular inheritance and not based on the bun and different ksuba. So my lav b'hakamifliki. So isn't this exactly what we saw? With the Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon, aren't they arguing exactly the way Rabbi Akiva and Ben Nanas argued? Demar Savar Achas B'chayav Achas B'moso, that when you have one wife die before the husband and one wife die after the husband, Yesh Lan Ksubas bun and different. That Rabbi Shimon says you have the bun and different rights, assuming of course that you have the Moser dinar. Umar Savar, and then the other one, the Tanakama said Achas B'chayav Achas B'moso. You don't have it. So low. No, you don't have to say that in fact this machlokas ties to the Ben Nanas and Rabbi Akiva machlokas, but rather to kuliyama achas b'chayav achas b'moso. You could say that really everybody agrees that if you have one wife die before the husband and one wife die after the husband, yesh lahen k'suvas bun and different. All agree that there is in fact a concept of bun and different, and that they would get that bun and different. We're not going to be worried about the fighting of the inheritors. And what they're arguing about is, does that dinar have to be associated with land? Because as a reminder, until the age of the Gaonim, the only thing that the wife could use to collect her ksuba was land. She was not entitled to metaltlin, to movable property, to collect her ksuba. And the reason is because we assume that people don't expect to be able to collect from movable property, because real property is the only property that you could really rely on. And so as a result, the assumption is that when it comes to both the bun and different rights, and when it comes to collecting the ksuba debt, so whether it's the bun and different rights of the children of wife A or the ksuba debt of the children of wife B, all of that is going to have to be collected from land. And so when we say that there's an extra dinar, so the question is does that extra dinar have to be land? Marsav or Makarke in metaltale lo. So the Tanakama, when he's the one who seems to be saying that you don't have a bun and different at all, he's really saying that if there's a dinar of land, so then that's where you would have it. But if you don't have the dinar of land, so then you wouldn't have then there would be no Banan Dichrin rights. Umar Savar Afilu Metaltale. Whereas Rabbi Shimon, who seems to be saying that the application of the Banan Dichrin rights is greater than the Tanakama, he says no, it only applies if it applies even if you have only a dinar left, even if those are just movable. But can we actually say this? Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon, we have a Mishnah in later on this daf that requires that it's got to be movable property. So, and if you don't have movable property, that's not considered anything. And so as a result, he clearly says that the Moser dinar has to be from real property. So yaser al shtei ksubos dinar. You need to have more than the value of the 2 ksubos by a dinar, and only then, and only if it's real property. So that cannot be our machlokas, or at least our machlokas cannot be like that and have Rabbi Shimon be the one who says that movable is okay. So elahacha b'dinar mishabdei kamiflaki. All right, so now we're going to try effort number 2. So again, that was effort number 1. Now we're going to try effort number 2. Really, they're arguing about a dinar that of pledged property. Mar savar b'mdei chorin in mishabdei lo. That the Tanakama says that you need, the dinar cannot have been pledged for another debt. Meaning that if I have a piece of real estate, so the husband has a piece of real estate, has 3 pieces of real estate. He has the piece of real estate that was given by wife a piece of real estate that is going to satisfy the ksuva of wife B, and he has a piece of real estate that is committed for a loan of equal value to that 3rd piece of real estate to some creditor. And so is that sufficient? Is that considered as if he has a Moser dinar, so that we would allow the children of wife A to get their Banan Dichrin rights? Or do we say, no, that isn't, he doesn't really have net assets of an extra dinar, because the net assets associated with that 3rd piece of property are 0, because the credit associated, the debt that he has associated with it, is equal to the value associated with it. So according to the Tanakama, he holds that you need to have, only free property, meaning property that is free of any debts associated with it, or that would not be totally eaten up by the debt. Umishabdi lo, and it can't be pledged. Umar savar afilu mishabdi. Whereas Rabbi Shimon says, no, it's totally okay. You have the assets currently. Yes, you might have a credit on your balance sheet, a debit, on your balance sheet against the value of the property. But when you look at your total assets, your total assets are above the assets necessary for to satisfy the 2 ksubas. And so as a result, that additional assets means that the Banan Dichrin inheritance would apply. And so that is our suggestion number 2 as to what the machlokas is about. But now we're going to challenge that. If that's so, meaning if in fact we are going to say that Rabbi Shimon says that even if you have pledged property, it can count toward your Moser dinar. Rabbi Shimon Omer, im yesh sham Moser dinar, kevan sheyesh sham Moser dinar miboile. The problem is that Rabbi Shimon said that if there is a surplus dinar, not since there is a surplus dinar. Now, what's the difference between those 2 languages? Well, if there is a surplus dinar suggests that he is adding something that doesn't apply to the Tanakama. Whereas kevan sheyesh sham Moser dinar, since there is a surplus dinar, suggests that there is something less that is required, meaning that even though the dinar is only pledged, since that surplus dinar exists, then it would make sense. But the problem is he didn't use the word kevan. He used the word im, which suggests that he's trying to be more strict than the Tanakama. So Ella befachos dinar kamaflagi. So we're going to try effort number 3. Really, they're going to argue about when there's less than a dinar left over. So the Tanakama says, so Mar Savar dinar in, pachos medinar lo. So we're going to say that when it comes to the Tanakama, he says that you need to have a full dinar, and if you have less than a dinar, then it doesn't work. Umar Savar afilu pachos medinar, and Rabbi Shimon's the one who says that even less than a dinar will work. But the problem is, Vaha Rabbi Yishimon dinar kamer. But 1 second, Rabbi Shimon specifically used the language of dinar. How could he possibly mean something less than a dinar? All right, v'chitema epoch. And if you want to try to reverse the things and now say that the Tanakama is the one who says that maybe you can have less than a dinar, whereas Rabbi Shimon says you need to have a dinar. Tanakama dimasnisin nami dinar kamer. In the Mishnah down below, we will also mention a dinar. The Tanakama's position of in the Mishnah will also mention a dinar. So presumably the Tanakama of the Mishnah below is similar to the Tanakama in the Brisa with Rabbi Shimon, because here also in our Mishnah we're going to have Rabbi Shimon as the Bar Plugta with the Tanakama, and so that suggests that the Tanakama who's arguing with him also says that you need to have a Moser dinar. There's no Moser of something less. So as a result, we've got to eliminate this last possibility. Ella ki hanak tre lishna kamai. So, but we can go back to our first 2 answers. So what were our first 2 answers? Our first 2 answers were, the first answer was that the Tanakama, was saying that the motor dinar needs to be land, not movable property. And Rabbi Shimon said the motor can be even movable property. And the second answer was that the motor dinar could be, has to be land that is currently in the estate and can't be something that's pledged, it's free. And Rabbi Shimon said, no, the motor can be land even that is pledged. But we saw the problem with both of those approaches is that the language of im suggests that Rabbi Shimon is really the one who's most strict. So as a result, the epoch. So we're going to reverse them. So now, if we follow the first answer, Rabbi Shimon will be the one who says that the motor dinar needs to be land, not movable property. And the Tanakama says, no, the movable property, the motor can be even for movable property. Or alternatively, the Tanakama could say that the motor dinar is the one that, even land that is pledged to another debt can be used as the motor dinar. And Rabbi Shimon says, no, the motor dinar needs to be land that is currently part of the estate and has no liens against it. And so that way, and what does this all allow us to do? Just as a reminder of why we got to this point, this was all in order to say that our machlokus in this brisa does not necessarily match up with the Benanas and Rabbi Akiva machlokus, meaning that we had wanted to say that these 2 Tanaim were also arguing about the applicability of the Banin Dichrin ksuba in the case of one wife dying before the husband and one wife dying after the husband. And we said, no, we can actually say that both the Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon believe in Banin Dichrin, and they and the question is just how wide is the scope of Banin Dichrin? Okay, so now that we've done that, we're ready to continue and give a ruling. So Amar Mar Zutra Mishmei de Rav Papa Hilchasa Achas B'Chayev B'Achas B'Moso Yesh Lehen Ksuvas Banin Dichrin. So the law is that if there is one wife who dies before the husband and one wife who dies after the husband, we are going to apply the Banin Dichrin Ksuba, meaning that the people of the wife who died before the husband will get the assets that wife brought to the marriage as an inheritance specifically for them. And not only that, but the ksuba itself namely the debt associated with the ksuba to wife number two, in and of itself, that can be counted towards the surplus for the ksuba. Meaning that if all you have is just the right amount of money to allow the second ksuba, to the ksuba for wife B, to be collected, then that will enable without impacting the bun and dichrin assets. Well, then the bun and dichrin assets will go to the children of wife A. But if in fact you could not collect enough money from the husband's other assets to pay the ksuba to wife B without impacting the bun and dichrin assets, well, then none of the children of wife A will be entitled to the bun and dichrin assets, and rather those will all go into a separate pot and all be part of an estate that will be divided among all the children of both wife A and wife B. Okay, so bishlama I ashmi'inan achas b'chaya v'achas b'moso yesh lahem ksubas ben and dichrin. So now the question is why did we need to teach both of these rulings? So if it makes total sense why we needed to teach that if we taught the first ruling, we would need to teach the second ruling. Because if I only taught the first ruling, that there's that we do say ksuba bun and dichrin when there's one wife who dies before the husband and one wife who dies after the husband, and we didn't tell you about the ksuba that the ksuba for the second wife could constitute the surplus that is necessary in order to enable bun and dichrin assets to be provided to be inherited as bun and dichrin assets. So because hava amina ika moser dinar in ilo lo, because I would have thought that you need to have a moser dinar beyond the ksuba assets that are going towards wife B's family. But in the end, we're saying that is not necessary. So you definitely need to teach the second rule. If you only taught the first rule, meaning if you taught the first rule, we definitely need to teach the second rule also. But but if I were to tell you that a ksuba can be the surplus for its counterpart, maybe that is all I need to tell you. I would be able to infer from that in a case where a man dies, where the wife A dies before the husband and wife B dies after the husband dies, so then I would know that of course that bun and dichrin applies, because that's the case of when a ksuba is the surplus that allows bun and dichrin to take a place. All you have to do is tell me that the second ksuba can be the surplus that allows bun and dichrin to apply, and I would know that also bun and dichrin applies. So now we're going to explain not necessarily, because maybe we could come up with a more complicated case, and now you'd understand, and you would think that if in fact we only taught the second rule, the rule that if you have a ksuba that can be the surplus necessary, that if I only learn that, I might not know the rule about a wife dying before the husband and a wife dying after. And I might think that if one wife dies before and one wife dies after, we would hold like Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva said that in that situation, we're worried about machlokes among the heirs. And so as a result, we're not going to apply bun and dichrin rights and give those to wife A's descendants. Because if I were to just have told you the law of a ksuba can be the surplus, let's do an example where the man marries three different wives, wife A, wife B, and wife C, and two of them die while he is alive, and the third, wife C, dies only after the husband. So, and now what happens? And the one that died after his death, Yoletis Nekevahi, she only had daughters. And so as a result, Vilav Bas Yerushahi. And so as a result, she's not eligible for any inheritance. In which case, that maybe it's only in that kind of situation where the fact that the ksuba debt that is going to her is going to get paid off, that's where we can say that the bun and dichrin rights will still go to wife A and wife B. But about achas b'chaya b'achas b'moso. But if you have two wives and both of them have male children, and you have one die before him and one die after him, hadla achar misa yoledes zacharhi. The one who died after the husband had male children, and so as a result, those children are eligible for participating in the inheritance. So ema lechush insuye. So maybe we should be worried about fighting. So kamash malan. So that's why Mar Zutra needed to teach us both laws, both the fact that even if one wife dies before the husband and one wife dies after the husband, we will apply bun and dichrin, and that the ksuba, for the wife who survived the husband, that ksuba debt, that also can satisfy the need for the Mosar dinar. And so as long as you can fully pay that ksuba, that will constitute the Mosar dinar necessary to allow the first wife's children to inherit their bun and dichrin rights. Okay, so now that is the end of what I've got in terms of notes. So I'll scroll up so that you can see that. And now we go to the next Mishnah. And now again, this Mishnah is going to continue with this laws of ksuba bun and dichrin. And the point is that we're going to see the law that we cited a few minutes ago. So Misha hayanasu shtei nashim. If somebody marries two wives, umesu, and they both die, v'achar kach meis hu, and now he dies. V'yasomim avakshin ksubas iman. So again, this is a simpler case. We didn't have one wife dying before him and one wife dying after him, but they both died before him. And so as a result, both the wife A's children and wife B's children each want to inherit the assets that their mom brought into the marriage. And so the orphans of each want the inheritance, the ksuba that their mothers were supposed to get, namely the ksuba bun and dichrin, because the main ksuba is only an obligation that the father has, or the father's estate has, if he divorces his wife or if he predeceases them. But the right to the property that they brought in, that's the ksuba that they are owed, that these inheritors are owed, the orphans of the two wives are owed from the estate of the father. So ve'ein sham ela shtei ksubot. And so now what if there's only enough to pay the two ksubot, meaning if wife A brought in property A and wife B brought in property B, and that's all there is. There's nothing else. There are no other assets that the husband had. Well, then cholkim b'shavim. You're not going to divide it as if they had the bun and dichrin rights, meaning children of wife A do not get property A, and children of wife B do not get property B, but rather property A and property B get totaled up, and they divide equally among them those two assets. However, if in fact there was more than a dinar left over, elu nodling subas iman, these take the ksuba for their mother. The elu nodling subas iman. So the children of wife A get property A, and the children of wife B get property B. And then the extra ksub, the extra dinar, gets divided equally among them. Im amru yisomim. Now, what happens if the children say the following? Anachnu malim al nase avinu yafa dinar. We are going to treat the property that of our father as worth an extra dinar. So that way, right? Because that way, now what will happen is now, in addition to being enough property for each of the two sets of children, there's an extra dinar, because what they're saying, let's just value at our property. And of course, you can understand that if the children of wife A, let's say wife A has the larger property, she brought in the larger property, and let's say she has the same number of children, or even more so if she has fewer children than wife B. So naturally, her children very much want to do the bun and dichrin. Of course, the children of wife B would prefer to divide everything equally, because they're going to get a smaller piece if they do the bun and different approach. But so the children of wife A say, okay, well, listen, we'll pretend that the value of our property is actually a dinar higher. And so that will be the dinar that we will share with the other brothers, and the rest of our property we'll get to keep. Well, no. Because and why are they saying it? Again, they want to say it because they want to keep the rest of the ksuba from their mother. So ain't shomin lehen. We don't listen to them. Rather, we appraise the actual property in court and determine its value, and that's how we're going to go. So if in fact there are additional assets that are expected to come into the estate, namely the husband's father is still alive, but he will eventually pass, and those assets may come into the estate, and now that will make the estate worth more, a sufficient amount more, that now there will be a moser dinar. That is not considered as if they're already in the possession. And so therefore that's going to prevent, so as a result, in a situation where only with those additional assets would there be a moser dinar, you would not get, none of the children would get their bun and dichrin rights. So Rabbi Shimon, instead, you would divide it all equally. Rabbi Shimon Omer, afilu yesham nechasim she'ein lehem achrayus. Even not only if there are, even if there are assets that are movable property, meaning that they don't have the ability to have liens against them, einan klum, those assets, those movable assets, are not counted as anything when it comes to valuing whether there's a moser dinar. Right? You need to have a dinar extra in real estate value, and that's the only way that you can have the bun and dichrin rights. So that seems to be the clear machlokas between the Tanna Kama and and Rabbi Shimon. Tanna Kama seems to allow the mosar to be even movable property, whereas Rabbi Shimon says no, the moser dinar has to be real property. And but again, as a reminder, the assets that that we're talking about in connection with either the bun and dichrin rights or the ksuba, those are only collected against real estate, and so it's only the mosar that there's an argument about. Everybody agrees that the main amounts, the amounts that are going to go to the ksuba, whether it's the ksuba bun and dichrin or the ksuba that the mother who survives the husband is owed, those ksuba payments are all going to have to come from real estate. Okay, so now we're going to Gemara ask, so Tana Rabbanan, Lizo elef Lizo chamesh meot. Let's say you have wife number one had a ksuba of 1,000, and wife number two had a ksuba of 500. Im yesham moser dinar. Elu nodlin ksubas iman, ve'elu nodlin ksubas iman. If there was a 1 dinar in addition, so again, you have you can see how this is to your point, James, that you don't need from a percentage perspective. It's a very, very small percentage of the overall state, but you still need something. So then everybody's going to get the moser dinar, that everybody's going to get their bun and dichrin rights. And obviously, depending on the number of children, the children of the wife number two, who only had a 500 dinar ksuba, they will be shortchanged because the other woman brought in a greater amount. So then, but if not, everything gets divided equally. So pshita murubin nismatu. So it's obvious that if, in fact, the value of the assets were sufficient when the father died, and then they decreased, kvar zachu bahen yorshin. So everybody already effectively acquired their share of the estate, meaning that the bun and dichrin, the children of wife A, who had this 1,000 dinar estate, they get their 1,000 dinars, and the children of wife two, they only get the 500 dinar property. And even though now that property has gone down in value, they had already effectively taken possession when the husband died. So muatin nisrabu mai. Well, what happens if the value goes up in amount? And so now, originally there was no surplus, and now there is a surplus when it comes time to divide it. So tashma, the nichse. So what's the halacha with respect to that? So come and listen. So the nichse debate bar tzartzur muatin b'nisrabu havu. So there was an estate of bar tzartzur where there was not enough assets at the time of his death in order to have a moser dinar. But then ba'asul kamei the Rav Amram, and they came in front of Rav Amram, but then it increased in value, and they went to Rav Amram. Amar lahu, he said to them, Zilu paisinu, go try and appease the sons of the wife with the larger ksuba, meaning the people who had less, they were trying to say, we want to divide equally. We want to go based on the original amount. And so he said, listen, go try to settle this, meaning maybe you can give them something less than they would have gotten in total, and everything will be fine. Lo ashkachu, and they weren't able to convince, they wouldn't listen. So Amr lahu, so Rav Amram said to them, Ilom sisu lahu, if you're not going to settle with them, machinu lahu b'silva delo ma dema. I'm going to end up having you, pick you with a thorn, and it's not going to draw blood. Meaning, I'm going to excommunicate you. Shadrinhu lekamei de Rav Nachman. So he sent them in front of Rav Nachman. So Amar lahen, and he said to them, Kashem shemerubim nismatu. So just as when you have a lot and now it gets decreased, zachu bahen yorshim, the people, everybody's already inherited based on the larger amount. So actually, he comes to a different conclusion. Rav Nachman says that actually the people who had less, actually already are going to get, you've already inherited your equal shares because it wasn't enough originally. And so as a result, you get the full shares that you're going to get, and everybody divides equally, even though the estate has now effectively does have the moser dinar. And so as a result, the people who were, the children of wife A end up losing out because at the moment of the husband's death, there was not enough assets in the estate in order to be able to do the bun and dichrin rights. Okay, so now we're going to go through a series of cases, and we're going to give a siman. The siman is Elef Umeya, Mitzvah B'Ksuva, Yaakov Zakev Sidosav, B'Dvar Masikim. So we're going to have, this is we'll see how these all tie up, but the bottom line is we're going to have a series of interesting cases. So Hahu Gabra, there's a certain guy, Havu Maske Be Alpha Zuze. He's owed 1,000 zuz. So Havile Treyapadne, and he had two estates, two mansions. And what's interesting in this particular case is that these are built real estate, because the next one's going to be plain fields. So because otherwise the question is sort of like, why do we need both of these? And I think that that's the reason. So when it comes to these two mansions, Zabinu chada b'chamesh meya, b'chada b'chamesh meya. So he sold them, one for 500 and another for 500. So he's got buyer A and buyer B, each have one of his two mansions. And now Asa Balchov, the creditor C, so he comes, and he comes and he grabs the property that was bought by buyer A. So Hadar Katarif Leidach. And now he's going to try and go to the buyer number B, to buyer B, and try and take his other 500, because after all, he was owed 1,000. And so he has claims against both of these two properties so that he can collect them both. So Shakel Alpha Zuze V'Ka'azal Legabe. So the buyer B now takes 1,000 zuz, which is the full amount of the debt, and he says to him, Amrlai, Ishav Yalach Alpha Zuze Lechaye. So v'lo shakel alpha zuzay v'istale. So I'm going to give you two choices. Listen, either I want you to agree that the property that you initially took is worth 1,000 to you, and you are fine with it, and you're not going to try to claim my property, the property that I bought, property B. Or if not, listen, I'll give you 1,000, which is the amount that you're owed, and you give me both mansions. I'll take both property A and property B. So Sava Rami Bar Chama Lamemer. So initially, Rami Bar Chama thought to say, Hainu Masnisin. Maybe this is in fact what our Mishnah says cannot happen. Because what did our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah said, "In Amri Yisom Hare Anuma Linnechse Avinu Yafa Dinar." If the orphans say, "I want to raise the value of the property by a dinar, so that now we have a Mosar dinar," we're not going to listen to them. So maybe just like that case, we don't listen to the person. Maybe we should not listen to buyer B in the case of the two mansions. So Amrle Rava said back to him, "No, me dummy, are these cases comparable? Hasam Islahu Psedi Diasme." The reason that in our Mishnah we don't allow the orphans to say that is because the other orphans lose, right? The orphans that have the smaller estate are going to end up losing if they, through the additional value, inflation of the valuation of one of the properties. But hacha mi islip seda, does anybody lose in the case here of the two mansions? No. Alpha Yahiv for Alpha Shakil. At the end of the day, the guy is going to either accept that the property he got is worth 1,000 and be happy with it because he feels like it's worth 1,000, or he's going to get 1,000 zuz, so he gets back what he was promised. So there shouldn't be any problem with this approach. The tirfa bekama kasvinan, and so now the question. So the follow-up.
Why would he accept that first option, that the first property is worth 1,000, just so he can hold on to some property?
Yeah, maybe he really likes the house was really well built, and he thinks that even though it was only valued at 500, for him, it got as they say in real estate, there are only three things that matter: location, location, location. So it could be that he has any number of reasons that maybe he would rather have 1,000. Have this location rather than 1,000 zuz. But most likely, you're absolutely right. He wouldn't accept it. I would expect most situations he would not accept it.
And what leverage does the second buyer have to not to be able to keep his house? Why can't the debtor just take both houses?
The leverage is that at the end of the day, the right that the buyer has is not really to the property, it's to be paid back. The property is what guarantees his ability to be paid back, but he's only entitled to the money that he is owed. He has a lien on the property, but that is not the same thing as a right to the property. And so as a result, the person who bought it can effectively say, no, I'd rather just give you the money. Now, there are some interesting ramifications, as we will see momentarily, how that happens in terms of the rights that the buyer would have against the person who sold it to him. So we'll see how that plays out in a few moments. But now, and indeed, we're going to talk now about the question of what happens, what gets written. Let's say in either of the case, whether the creditor says, you know what, I think property A is worth 1,000 to me, I'm going to keep it as if it's worth 1,000, or he says, no, you give me 1,000 and I'll give you the property. And so now, so tirfa bekama kasvinan. So the question is, at the end of the day, when the property is taken by a creditor from a purchaser, assuming that the sale is made with a guarantee that it's a good sale and that I'm going to make you whole if somebody comes and takes the property from you, then what gets written in the document that allows the purchaser to go back to the seller to get his money? Meaning, how much gets put in there? Does 500 get put in there, or does 1,000? So Ravina Amar Alpha, Ravina says that you put in 1,000, because effectively what the person is now saying, what the buyer B has effectively made property A worth 1,000. And so as a result, Ravina says, look, he's effectively saying property A is worth 1,000, so we're going to treat it as a worth 1,000. And so as a result, when buyer A goes back to the seller, he's going to be able to collect 1,000 back from him. But Rav Avira Amar b'chamesh mea. No, it's only 500. And the issue is just to be clear about this. Let's say I lend James $1,000. I sell a piece of property to Miriam for 500. And after I lent James the money, and the money was lent with a contract. So as a result, Miriam knows that when she bought the property, it was subject to the lien that James had against me. And now, though, the property is actually worth 1,000. It went up in value after Miriam bought it. She's a very smart real estate person. And so as a result, now James comes and I don't have any real property to be taken. And so as a result, James comes to Miriam and says, I want that piece of property. And now that piece of property is worth 1,000. And so James takes it as full payment of the debt that I owed him. And now the question is, what happens for Miriam? Does she get only 500 because that's what she bought it for? Or does she get 1,000? Well, I'm sure you all want her to get 1,000. And indeed, that is in fact what she would get because the property went up in value. And so you can see, based on that short story, how come Ravina might think that you would say 1,000 in this case. But in any event, in this case, it isn't truly a value that has gone up. It's just the circumstances that buyer B has set up. And so as a result, the Hilchasa b'chamesh meya, it's only worth 500. Now we're going to have the exact same story, so we'll go through it very quickly, and you'll see that the same story with fields as opposed to.
Do the laws of overcharging apply to property?
No, the laws of overcharging do not apply to property. So now we have the case where there's 100 zuz. He had 2 fields. So he's sold each of the fields for 50 zuz. Also, Balzcho, Tarfel Chadminayu, other also Victorif Leidach, Shakel Meazuze, because of the Gabe, Vamar, Ishav Yalach Meazuze, Lechaye, Vilo Shakel Meazuze, the Istalik. So again, you have 2 choices. The 2 people bought them. One bought field A, one bought field B, and now the creditor comes, takes away field A, comes to the person for field B, and then field B's buyer says, listen, I'm going to give you 100 zuz, and you give me the field, or agree that the field that you took from buyer A is in fact worth 100. So again, Savar of Yosef Lamemer, now it's a Rav Yosef that thought Hainu Mastis, and maybe this is just like our Mishnah. And Amar Le Abaye say me dummy, are they comparable? Hasam Islu say the Leasme, Hakal my say the Leasle, Ma'ayahev Mahav Shakel. At the end of the day, nobody's losing here, and so as a result, it is a legitimate statement to make, and everything is fine. But the Tirpa B'chama Kasvina, and in this case, how much do we end up writing in the document for buyer A because the property was taken away from him? So Ravina Amar B'meya, Ravina says 100, Ravira Amar B'chamishin, and Ravira says 50. The Hilchos B'chamishin. And although I didn't see an explanation of why you would need both, but one could argue that when it comes to real property that has improvements on it, it makes a ton of sense to potentially say that there is special, unique value associated with it. But when it comes to property that is unimproved, so then there's nothing special about it. So maybe I would say that in that situation, you would never even say that it could be worth 100. But even in that situation, Ravina does argue. And of course, you can argue, you spin everything around, and you can say the reason that Rebbe Avira, we need to teach both laws as well, again, to teach you that even he would agree that they basically argue in both cases. The Hilchos of B'chamishin, and again, the halacha is that in both cases we value it based on its true value and not the value of the specific circumstances here. Hahu Gavra, we'll do one more case. Dahavu Maskebe Me'ezuze. So there's a guy who owed 100 zuz. Shachav, he passed away. Shava Katina de Aram Dahava Shavya Chamishin Zuze. And he left only one field that was worth 50 zuz. So Asa Balcho B'Katar Flay. So the Balcho, who is owed 100, he comes and he takes it. So the orphans come and they give him 50 zuz and say, "Listen, Hadar Katarifla." Because they want to take the field. So Hadar Katarifla. But then he gives them back the field and he keeps the money. But then and he goes back and he tries to collect the field a second time, meaning they only gave him half of the debt. So as a result, he's going to say, "Look, you took the field back. Now I'm going to use the rest of my lien on the field. I had 100 zuz lien on the field. You've paid off 50 of it, but I want the rest." So Asul Kamed Abaye came in front of Abaye. So Amar Lahen mitzvah al yisom lifro chovaviyim, that there's a mitzvah that even though people who are the children of the debtor do not have an obligation to pay the debts of the father, meaning the debts of the father get paid out of the estate, but there's no additional obligation to pay. It's a mitzvah for them to pay so that they can fulfill the obligations of their father, but there's no specific legal obligation. They're not actually required to pay. So Hanikame mitzvah da'avidu. So as a result, because these people did not make a specific condition when they gave the initial 50 zuz, so we're going to consider it as if they did a mitzvah. So hashta kitarf bedin kitarf, and so as a result, now that he's trying to collect the remaining 50, that's going to be, that is, has the rights to do it. The low amran, the low amru le hani chamishin zuze demei de arakatina, and that the key is that they have to have, it's only true where they didn't say that this 50 zuz is basically to buy the field. Because aval amrle hani chamishin zuze demei arakatina, but if they say that when they're giving the 50 zuz, it's in order to buy the field, well then saluki salkua. So then, as a result, they've actually purchased the field. And one of the things that we'll see is that when when a third party effectively purchases the field, so then the lien goes away. And so as a result, what they've effectively done, so, essentially, just as if I lend money to James, and then I sell property to Miriam, and now, let's say I lent James $100, and now I sold Miriam the field for $50, and now I have no money, and so as a result, James comes to Miriam and takes the field for 50. And so as a result, and now James sells the field to Hanan. And so for 50, he doesn't have the right to now go to Hanan and say, "Oh, I can go to Hanan and claim the field because I have a lien on the field for the remaining 50. No, of course not. He can't do that. And so similarly, just as he can't do that, if in fact the inheritors were to come and buy it, so as a result, those inheritors also, like Hanan, have no ability for James to go and claim against them. However, if when we're talking about the inheritors, they don't actually say they're buying the field, but only just hand over the money, well, then the application of the fact that they have a mitzvah to fulfill the debts of their parents. So then as a result, James would have the ability to make the claim back. So we'll pause here, we'll stop here, and we'll deal with the additional cases. We're going to have a series of additional cases straight through to the next Mishnah. Tomorrow's daf is a shorter daf, especially the Amud Bet is shorter, and will get us to the Mishnah on Sadik Gimel Amud Aleph. And with that, we'll finish all of the different cases that were highlighted by the mnemonic at the top of the Sadik Aleph Amud Bet. So we'll pick up from there, God willing, tomorrow.
Thank you, David.
Thanks,
You're
David.
very welcome. So we'll so for those who are able, we'll pick up 7:45, God willing, after Chakras, third floor of HIR and on Zoom as well.
Good night.
Good night.
Tov.